change only when they're sick and tired of being sick and tired. So you change through desperation much more than you do through inspiration.
Today I have a very, very special guest, two actually, co-host and an amazing guest. He's a motivational speaker. He's the author of 8 books, including The Flip Side, which is right here, and also Health, Wealth, Love and Happiness, and that's been translated into over 27 languages. He's done work for the Nursing Times and the Health Guardian. He's developed and produced a successful non-steroid treatment for psoriasis, and he's also developing apps for different for health as well. So he's got his fingers in many pies, and I hope we're going to dig into it and get a lot from it. So I'm really excited. So please welcome Adam Jackson. Okay, so we'll start off. What is the flip side, and what was the first time? When was the first time you experienced the flip side personally?
Right. Well, the flip side is an idea, a concept that bad things, negative things that happen to us in life are often catalysts for much better things. I was first introduced to the whole idea quite a few years ago at university. I was the first year law student, and I was at a showing of a play called Whose Life Is It Anyway?, which is about a man who ends up paralysed, quadriplegic from the neck down. And it's about his illegal fight for the right to die, because obviously he can't commit suicide because he can't do anything. So if he wants to die, unlike an able-bodied person who can just take tablets or whatever, when you're in that situation, there's not much you can do. So at the end of it, it's a great play, and it was made into a movie years ago as well. It's really good. And at the end of this, there was a symposium with a legal professor, a psychology professor, and there were 2 guys in wheelchairs, and one was a quadriplegic, just like the character in the play, and the other one was a paraplegic, so paralysed from the waist down. And what was interesting was during this forum that took place, the 2 men in the wheelchairs had said that their lives were actually happier, more fulfilled than they had ever been before, and they would not change or go back and change things. And that was something I thought was unbelievable to me, because I mean, can't even brush his teeth.
Yeah.
So you think, my goodness, how is that possible?
Exactly. So what?
And so there is very good and sound reason why this happens. And if you compare this to, for example, winning the lottery, okay, which most of us aspire to do, we think that's going to solve all of our problems and make us happy for the rest of our lives. But the fact is, after 5 years, over a third of all lottery winners end up bankrupt. Yeah. And the problem, so you've got a bad situation, or what appears a bad situation, like the chap in this play and the men in the wheelchairs, and you've got a lottery winner. Lottery winners end up miserable. Not all of them, of course, but they can do, and a lot of them do. And people who go through some of these traumas end up feeling completely different about themselves. And there are some of the reasons are it gives you meaning in your life. So when you go through a trauma, suddenly you've got challenges to overcome that most of us, when we just go through life, we don't have challenges. We just go through day to day on sort of like a treadmill, and we get into a sort of hypnotized state where it's just...
I was going to say, is that because we don't push ourselves and we don't test ourselves enough?
Possibly, yeah, because you change. Okay, a friend of mine in the States years ago, I met, he was probably the man who had the most influence on my life. He was an American guy backpacking around Europe, and he was so fit and active, and I was chatting with him, and one of the reasons, he's explained, he was a recovering alcoholic actually, and he introduced me to the idea of what you eat affects your health, for example. But one of the things he said was, people change only when they're sick and tired of being sick and tired. So you change through desperation much more than you do through inspiration. Yeah. But obviously you can change if through inspiration as well.
But pain's a greater motivator than...
Pain is a much greater
pleasure.
Motivator. So for example, and an easy example of that is that if I said to you, well, if you get up at 6 o'clock on Sunday and go to the market, I'll pay you £100. some people would do it, it's quite a lot of money, but a lot of people wouldn't.
Yeah.
But if I said you've got to get up at 6 o'clock because someone's stealing something from you,
That's a great way.
so
Straight up.
It makes there's a huge difference in motivation.
Yeah, it's true.
Whether you're,
I never thought of it like that actually. That's a great point.
Yeah. So yeah, that the idea of the flip side is why. I was looking into why does it happen to some people.
Yeah.
The people can go through the same experience, but one of them can be destroyed, and the other comes out, completely empowered, and their life, it's life changing.
Yeah.
And so that's what the book is about, exploring why this happens and what we can do to flip any bad experience.
Yeah. Okay.
What is about.
So can you tell us a little bit about your experience? So when growing up, how you saw the flip side, ended up seeing the flip side, and what happened to you?
Well, when I was young, 6, 7 years old, my parents got divorced, and I started to develop a skin condition called psoriasis. It's a chronic, incurable skin complaint. I remember waking up one morning and my torso was covered in red blotches, just sort of happened like that. And the doctor came, we were living with relatives, and the doctor came and he didn't even look at me.
Yeah.
He said to my aunt, who was looking after me at the time, he's going to have this for the rest of his life. Yeah. I thought, oh my God, can you imagine? And it just covered, I was 80 to 90% covered. At one point when I was 14, I was hospitalised.
Wow.
I went to Queen Mary's Hospital in Chiswick, and I spent 6 weeks there, where they burn you with tar and dithronol paste and wrap you up, and you have baths and so forth. And I came out and it was a lot better.
Yeah.
Obviously there are side effects involved in that, but I remember as I was leaving, the nurse took me to the burn department, which was just across. And where people, they're suffering for the rest of their lives with horrendous pain. She was trying to sort of teach me a lesson. Well, things could be a lot worse.
Sure. Yeah.
But she said, you're going to be back every year. Everybody does.
Wow.
And it was at that point, I was just, it was an incident. A lady in the room next to me was Malaysian. And so we went up sort of private rooms. And I remember one day, the dermatologist had gone in to see her after he did me, and I had some shouting going on, and afterwards I popped in to see her, and it turned out that she hadn't eaten her lamb, right? And when the dermatologist asked her, why haven't you eaten your lunch? She said, every time I eat lamb, my skin erupts. And he started having a go at her, saying, what you eat does not affect your skin, you should be grateful for the food you're given, and stop with this nonsense. Well, years later, we find out that actually people with psoriasis have problems metabolizing saturated fats and animal fats, and we know that the arachidonic acid that's in red meat it irritates any inflammatory condition. Right? So she had a point. Specialists, I've got this thing, George Bernard Shaw said specialist is someone who knows more and more about less and less until they know absolutely everything about nothing at all. And there's truth to that, because we look at things, you've got specialists who they're only concerned with kidneys, or only concerned with the eyes, or only concerned, cardiovascular. But the truth is, the whole body works
holistic.
It's got a combination of systems. Yeah. So, they leave the diets to dietitians, and that's the problem with medicine today. But coming back to your question, that was what started me. So I think, I'm going to start to look for ways that I can help myself, because they can't help me.
At 14?
At 14. So I was given corticosteroids, Benadryl, and so forth to put on my skin, but that thins the skin. So I tried hypnotherapy, I started looking at my diet, and so it was a long process of trying to come to it, and it was only, I never, at that point, fully resolved it. And then actually, I'm not even sure it is something, or, health is something where you resolve it and cure it forever. Yeah. We all have predispositions. So for some people, when they get stressed, for example, they might develop migraines or stomach ulcers, and some people, like me, would get skin complaints. Yeah? It's just how you manage your life from time to time. But I started to search of ways that I might be able to help myself, and that's And it was actually at university, I got a flare up again in the first year. But going to that play made me think, maybe there's something in what I've got. I mean, when we have a negative experience, sometimes we can take the attitude, well, why did this happen to me? And we start, blaming God or whatever. Instead of, so the focusing on what's been taken away, what you've lost, instead of what you've got.
Exactly. So it's becoming, rather than being a victim, you're them taking full responsibility for what's happened to you and looking more abundantly at what you have rather than what you haven't got.
Absolutely. Yeah. That is one of the key parts of being able to flip any negative experience is being able to focus on what you've got rather than, it's like the old half glass full and empty thing. But it goes beyond that. That's quite a simplistic version, but it's very true. Yeah. In that, and it's natural to feel, when you've lost something, to feel, shit, I've lost. What could be the use of my sight, or some really serious things that I covered in the book with people who've gone through outrageously negative experiences, and from being paralysed and going blind and what have you. But it's having the mindset of thinking, what have I got and what can I do with it to build a better future?
And then based on that, what did you then do how did you see what you had to your advantage?
Well, because I was always looking at, first of all, it made me focus on my health. So, I'm not sure whether I would have made the changes that I did in terms of, I became much more conscious about my diet, about activity, physical activity, about stress. So who's to say? But there was a benefit actually, is that psoriasis sufferers tend to get far fewer cancers than people who don't have psoriasis. It's like 2%. Having said that, a lot of the treatments can actually cause a cancer. So, right. But yeah, that eventually I got to the point where I was able to do some real research. But when the online, things went online, and I was able to look at research into anything. That's why I was writing for the Nursing Times and the Health Guardian, and I would always look at if there was anything on psoriasis. And one day I came across some research that was done with a herbal extract with psoriasis. I thought, wow, 81% of users were either completely clear or significantly clear after 12 weeks. Wow, why? I wrote this article assuming that this was available. Yeah. Why would it not be? But I've got so many inquiries. Well, where is this? And I found out it wasn't available. And the reason it's not available because drug companies are not interested in a remedy that they can't patent because there's no money. They can't protect their investment. And so I got in touch with a herbal pharmaceutical type company. They were mainly doing creams and lotions and things, not so much medical. And I said, look, could you put this together? I gave them the research. We put it together just as never expected it to be anything big. Yeah. And then it sort of took off. I mean, the problem with any, these days, with any natural remedy, it's so strictly regulated now. You can't make any claims on anything, even if there's been sound scientific research, reported in medical journals.
So you can't say...
they call it a marketing authorization. Okay. I don't know what it costs now, but at the time, it was costing £58,000 non-refundable for an application fee alone. So the fees, and that's for one product. Wow. So basically... And
you went through that?
No.
No, you didn't?
No. So because we couldn't market it as, we're a small company. That's not just one, that's just the application fee. Yeah. There's then all that, you've got to have studies done and so forth. Yeah. So we couldn't make any claims on or anything like that. But if people look on the internet, they see the research. It does work for most people. Having said that, I'm a great believer in changing your lifestyle rather than relying on creams or lotions or this and that, and doing what you can to help yourself, because psoriasis, like a lot of it's involved with the immune system, and it's involved with stress. Those things will often trigger it.
Yeah.
When we have a trauma, an emotional trauma, it can trigger it. When my parents got divorced, that probably played a factor. And it can be triggered by throat infections, for example.
So from the experience, would you say the flip side to having the illness was that you researched and developed almost I don't want to say the word cure, but you found alternative ways to deal with it?
Yeah, absolutely. I wouldn't have found it without it. But more than that, for me, that having had psoriasis through those years in childhood, makes you more empathetic towards other sufferers, and it changed my whole approach to, became rather, from a cocky little boy at the time, you become suddenly much more sensitive, not just to yourself but to other people.
Okay.
Changed me. I went into study law, and I qualified. I went to university, did a law degree, went to law school, and then did my art school and became a solicitor. But I didn't pursue that ultimately because I had another passion in my life, and I think having a passion for what you do is really important if you can
definitely
do things. But most of the time we get trapped, and we don't. You've got to pay the bills, and unless you can find that and develop a passion early enough, it can become really
based on that, where you feel trapped and you feel like you have to do something. I just want to get your views on the flip side that you've found in your life, and then I want to come back to you, Adam, and talk about post-traumatic growth and what can come from the problem, so to speak.
Yeah.
So just what happened to you, and how did you see the flip side to that?
So I was talking to you earlier. So I went to school, university, got a degree. But on the side of that, I was involved in smoking weed and selling bags of it. And I had a graduate job over in Belfast, and same thing again. I was arrogant, I was cocky, lost the job for those reasons. 3 months later, I was driving a car full with skunk from the front seat, back seat, boot, driving along, and the police come along, and that was it. I was arrested, and the next day I was in prison. So literally, it was a rude awakening, and just in that space of nowhere, I'm sat in prison.
Yeah.
1 minute I'm being flown across to another place to be a graduate recruited, and the next minute I'm stuck in prison. So pretty much from day one, I said to myself, what am I here for? What's this all about? I just took stock of my life and what's important to me, and it probably took me about 8 or 9 months till I really honed in and had this focus till it all become clear. And I wrote this list of what do I want in life, and there was probably like 17, 18 things on this list. 2 of them cost money. I wanted a well-built home, and I think it was an office. I wanted to have an office. The rest of it are all free. I wanted, a loving wife. I wanted, happy children. I wanted a good relationship with my friends. I wanted to give speeches. I wanted to help people. I wanted to inspire others. So these are all things that you can get from within yourself, and what you can get from others, rather than what you can get by spending his money out. So with that focus, I then was able to realise, well, actually, I don't need all of this, this perceived money that I thought I could earn, and woke up to reality what was important to me and that what I wanted to do, and it very quickly focused my mind on what we do have, especially in terms of money, in terms of time.
Okay.
So I realised that time is one of those things we're never going to get again. So if you're wasting it, in the clubs, going out, spending money doing nothing, on clothes, just spending time doing nothing productive. It's a complete waste of the gift that we're given. So therefore, since then, it's 6 years later, I've spent every day I can without wasting time, building a company, getting married, having children, and now at the point where I'm giving back to try and help others that have come through. So the flip side of my experience was literally, going from that cocky, arrogant, a guy who didn't value my life and didn't value the time that we were given
Yeah.
to someone who really appreciates the more simple things in life, and values, time and what we actually have got here.
Definitely.
And just like what you're saying, so that's
So
sort of my story.
you said something to me a little while ago, and you said that prison was I think it was the best thing that's ever
definitely
happened to you, which it just illustrates what you're saying about the play that you went to watch with the
Quadriplegic.
it just demonstrates that point, doesn't it? That sometimes the obstacle or the thing getting in your way, it can be the biggest blessing.
Absolutely.
Just
What you were alluding to just before about post-traumatic growth, as opposed to post-traumatic stress disorder, which are not necessarily mutually exclusive, so that you can have the two together.
Yeah.
But the post-traumatic growth is very common. It just wasn't widely reported. In that suffering can bring its own rewards, and it's been written about in scriptures as well. But it was only back in the 1990s that they really started to study this and the aspects to it. Why do people feel more empowered? Why do they change in a positive way following a trauma of some kind? What is it that leads to a life-defining moment in that suffering that changes people?
What you've just said, it's been in the scriptures and it's been around for hundreds, thousands of years. It's nothing new that Plato, Socrates, Seneca, Marcus Aurelius, all these Greek philosophers, they've been saying the same thing for the last however many hundreds of years. But it's just a thing about bringing that sort of wisdom and knowledge into the modern age. What would you say is, how do we make people, well, not make people, but how can someone look at their lives in more of an optimistic way and see what they've got? Is there any ways people can do that?
Yeah, absolutely. So optimism is a key part of finding a flip side. Okay. So there are a number of characteristics that I found that move people towards this change in a positive way. But one of the key ones is optimism. So is optimism inherent? Is it something that we acquire through our genes, or can it be acquired? And the fact is that optimism can be inherent, but it can also be acquired. Okay. In the same way, there's a positive psychologist, American called Martin Seligman, did a lot of work in this field, and there's lots of research showing that what we call learned helplessness, where you learn to become helpless. So, for example, they've done horrible things with animal experiments where they'll, for example, give electric shocks if, for instance, an animal tries to pass through a door, and eventually the animal won't even attempt to pass through a door, because even if they stop the electrical currents altogether, because they've learned that they're helpless, they can't do anything. And in the same way, we can learn to be empowered, and all it takes is changing some of the things we do. So changing, and we can do this consciously. Okay. So, for example, instead of allowing our subconscious to ask us, because we ask questions in our mind all of the time. Whatever we're doing, we're asking questions. But instead of allowing our subconscious to control and ask negative questions like, why does this happen to me? Why can't I ever get a break? And those sorts of questions. To consciously say, as you said, what is good about this situation? What can I learn from this situation? Or what can I do that would benefit me and other people? So it's learning to ask positive questions is one of the keys. In fact, in terms of happiness, I'm writing a book at the moment on writing. It's about how keeping a journal, for example, changes them. Yeah. And some research that came out was really interesting. It's gratitude journal, which is just about writing things down that you're grateful for. Could be 3 or 5 things. Doesn't have to be a whole list. And they found that the most effective is actually to do it once or twice a week, not even every day. Okay. And just by doing that, increases people's feelings of happiness, because they're now more conscious of the things that they've got to be grateful for in their lives. And oftentimes we only get that feeling of gratitude and following trauma
when we
or
lose
loss,
something,
when
yeah.
we lose something.
Yeah.
So
Is that because, does it let off like endorphins? Is there sort of a scientific way to explain that, or is it just because
it changes? It's a way of, it changes your focus. I remember a friend coming to visit, and his view is he never expects the good. He never expects a good outcome.
Yeah.
Only negative, because that way he said, I'll never be disappointed. Yeah, but that is never going to work.
No.
Because if you expect the worst, that's what you're going to experience in most cases. And it's been proven time and again that what you focus on is what you experience, and generally what the outcome is. So you'll know from football, if a player is coming up to take a penalty and he thinks he's got no chance of scoring, it's unlikely he's going to score.
Of course, yeah.
Confidence is so important in whatever we do.
Because you wire in your brain, when you think I'm going to score, it's like, where am I going to put the ball, and what are you thinking about how you're going to score? But if you think, I'm never going to score this, it's going to be like a reluctant run up. You're not going to put your heart and soul into it. So it's really...
I remember going to a seminar years ago, an Anthony Robbins seminar, which is a really interesting, great experience. And part of it, he asked people to look around the room. So you know this one?
I know it, yeah.
So they look around the room and say, right, I want you to look around now and notice everything that's brown, right? And they look around and say, okay, now. Then it says, shut your eyes. And now tell me everything you saw that was blue. Very tough, because we've only been focusing on the brown. And the same happens in life. If you're looking out, only looking for bad things, that's what you're going to see.
Yeah.
But if you look for positive things, that's what you notice.
Yeah. Okay.
So
what about the counter argument to that? If someone was to say, "Oh, you're trying to be too positive. You're one of these positive people. Everything's positive, or it's fluffy." Because there is people like that they probably are pessimistic, or they might call it realistic, and they try and argue against this sort of way of looking at the world, this positive way of looking at the world. Is there an argument back to them?
Well, people can live their lives the way they want. If you want to be pessimistic, go ahead. But the fact is, and you can look at again the research, people who are optimistic, they live longer, they're healthier, they're happier. There's a Martin Seligman. He did a questionnaire. Right? It can be reduced to 10 questions. 4 of those questions are irrelevant. They're just there as spaces to distract. Right? And from those questions, you'll be able to tell, without any medical knowledge of a patient, for example, you can tell which are the ones most likely to survive with like a 95% accuracy.
Based on whether they're optimistic.
Based upon optimism, yeah. It's so important to be optimistic. So, people can choose to be, and it is a choice.
Yeah.
It's not, I'm a pessimistic person. Okay, you may have learned to become pessimistic, and there may be something in it with the genes, but you can change, and that's the most exciting thing, because a lot of people don't want to change.
Yeah.
As I said before, people change when they're sick and tired of being sick and tired.
Yeah.
But sometimes you've got to reach that rock bottom
before you can make that change.
The problem is, even from my experience, if you only ever think about the worst, there is no opportunity. There's nowhere else to go.
Yeah.
So, take another person that ended up in my situation. They've sat in prison. They've got a criminal record. They've got no job prospects. They can't see their wives, their children, their mothers. They can't go to weddings and funerals. They've been missing all these things. So if they look at it from a negative point of view, well, you may well end up spending your rest of life there. You may well not even bother wanting to get out. There's while I was there, there's whole queues of guys waiting to get their Subutex and their methadone substitute or heroin substitutes, because there's nowhere else to go. They're smoking themselves into oblivion because there's no other opportunity.
Yeah.
But when you can see an opportunity in life, then and the positiveness of it, you can see there's more to it. You can look outside that window and say, well, do you know what? I might be stuck here now, but there's still going to be a time when I'm going to be able to go there. What am I going to do now that's going to prepare me for when I get out there? So
that's so true. I remember there's a really, really great book called Man's Search for Meaning by Dr. Viktor Frankl.
Yeah.
It's a great book. He was incarcerated in the Second World War in Auschwitz, Holocaust survivor. But he was able. It's a great book because basically he developed a field of psychology called logotherapy, and it all developed through his experience in Auschwitz. And he found he was able to give people the will to live in the concentration camp by asking them one question, and that was, what is the first thing you're going to do when you get out of here?
Yeah.
Suddenly they feel, well, it opens their mind to, I'm going to tell the world, I'm going to find my family, I'm going to write a book, whatever it is, they're focusing on beyond where they are.
Yeah.
And he noticed, that by being able to focus towards goals that we mentioned earlier, has a huge impact on your, not just your mindset, but also on your well-being and so forth. But people don't realise that their emotions affect their body chemistry.
Yeah.
So, for example, if you are angry and resentful, or you have these emotions for 5 minutes, it impairs the immune system for 6 hours.
Is that right?
Yeah. So you can imagine if you're going through life feeling angry towards someone or something, or resentful because you lost something, or this is not going to be good for your long-term health.
Yeah.
And so these things are really important to try and change the mindset. The problem is for a lot of people, as you mentioned, is that you can be in a situation where you're not introduced to the idea that anything's possible. You've learned to become helpless because the system has made you become helpless.
It's like a fish in water doesn't know it's in water until it jumps up and sees that what's possible, sees what else is out there.
Absolutely.
So I think that example was in your book, wasn't it? The Viktor Frankl one.
It is,
Just on that, there's loads of great case studies in there. Is there any ones in particular, except for that one, that particularly stands out to you, where someone's really seen the flip side in their lives?
Well, there are loads of case studies of people in there, from entrepreneurs who built up.
Richard Branson, wasn't it?
Richard Branson's in there. Peter Jones. There's a guy called Sylvan Goldman in America who developed the shopping cart in the 1930s. He needed a way of people buying more product, but there's only so much they could carry in the basket. And believe it or not, with this shopping cart, no one wanted to use them to begin with, because young people thought it made them look weak, and older people thought it made them look helpless. Men thought it made them look too girly. So there was a challenge to get people to use them. But there's loads. There was one guy in there that I thought was quite funny. He's a Taiwanese chap who's a motivational speaker, and he's a painter and so forth. But he's blind in one eye. He lost. He has either arm. He lost the use of one leg. Was deformed. Was not deformed. Yeah, it became deformed. Yeah. The right leg he lost below the knee. So he went through unbelievable suffering. Yeah. He considers himself the luckiest man in the world. He's married, he's got kids now. But it's quite unbelievable. He had one setback after another. He got electrocuted in a factory, and that was the start of it. And then his sister, there was an accident.
I read about this.
Went in his eye. And my goodness, but he's probably an extreme example. Yeah. But there's some really cool people. From an Israeli guy who had a car accident who developed an exoskeleton with a battery pack that allows paralysed people to walk.
Oh wow!
But the irony was it didn't work for him because his paralysis was too high up in the thorax. But nevertheless, I spoke to him and he said he would never have developed, it would never have occurred to him had he not gone through it. Yeah. So it's astonishing when you see what people have done. And the truth is, we don't invent things unless there's a problem to be solved. So that's why problems.
That's true. Yeah. Can bring solutions.
Most entrepreneurs will look at a need, what's not being dealt with now, and they'll develop something to help people who have that need. So
I want to get both your opinions really. Why? Obviously, this is of mass importance because it can change your life, and it's changed your life, both your lives. So why is it not taught the flip side in schools?
I think traditional education is just focused on exams, right? And there's a major problem in that because we're not really developing our minds. In fact, here's a good one. It comes from the research I was doing for my current book about writing. Well, if you write things down with a pen, for example, you remember it. You remember it a lot more effectively than if you type on it. And what they found is the process of writing activates the frontal lobar parts of the brain. Typing doesn't. So in the past decade, they've introduced iPads and laptops into a lot of colleges and schools. It actually hinders people because it doesn't, the front lobes of the brain are not being used, and also there's lots of distractions going on too.
Yeah.
But, you know, I think conventional medicine is more about moving people where society thinks they ought to go, rather than developing them as
human beings and people.
Yeah, focusing on exams, and you know, I think sometimes the worst affected students are the ones that get straight A's all the time.
Yeah.
Because you come out of school or university, you've never failed because you've learned how to pass exams. But the fact is that in life, you can't go through life without failing.
Yeah.
Someone's going to reject you at some point, and we're going to all go through various things that don't appear to go our way. And if you've not had the experience before, you know, suddenly to be confronted with it in your 20s and 30s can be crushing.
Yeah.
Because you've never had to deal with failure or rejection. So yeah, I think, you know, the whole education system, you know, to me, it's all geared towards getting to the next school, the next university, and then getting a job.
Getting a job, yeah.
As opposed to developing your skills and then doing something.
Yeah,
you know,
of course.
you know, through your experience, you've built your own company. Well, you know, looking back, if you'd have just been employed, chances are you get into a comfortable job, and that's it.
Yeah.
I had to do something.
You had
I had no choice. It was So it was either that, or you know, possibly go back and end up going back into the arms of people that, you know, I'd known previously, and then become one of the statistics of, you know, the 70% that go back in within 3 years. You know, to go back to the question about why don't I teach it in schools, it goes back to what you said about the compartmentalising of I think it was health. We're talking about, you know, doctors only knowing different parts of the body. Well, I think with the school system, they know their, you know, geography, maths, history. You know, they know about their academic areas.
Yeah.
But then there seems there isn't a focus on personal development and self-development of them as human beings and members of society, and how they're going to interact with society and what they're going to do when they're out in society. You know, we've got you know, massive issue with, you know, not an issue, but the thing of single parent homes now. So in a lot of families there isn't, you know, a strong male role model there. So you're getting these, you know, a lot of young guys that are ended up then, you know, disillusioned, you know, without any to say to them what they should and shouldn't do as they're growing up, these young men.
Yeah.
The school won't provide that. You know, there's no facility for it in the social care system, because that 14, 15, they're then moving out of it. You know, so, you know, ideally they need to be having mentors and, you know, young entrepreneurs, you know, sports people, or people that have done well in their careers, coming back in and helping to, you know, guide the younger generation. But the school won't provide that. You know, the school, there's no financial or academic benefits there.
Okay.
Like you said, you know, it's all about numbers. The school get judged on how many A's they
not how many good people they develop.
How many good people they turn out. Exactly.
That's definitely the case.
So maybe a better question than that is, going forward, what's the way? How can then the younger generations, particularly those at school, then how can we help with them?
It can be, you know, being exposed to these ideas, you know, that we're talking about, and you know, that you can have some control over your life, and because we're basically taught that life is governed by external forces. Our health, we've got to go see. I mean, I'm not saying people shouldn't go and see the doctor, but you know, people look up to the doctor. The doctor will solve my health problems rather than I'll solve them.
Yeah.
And the same, you know, spiritually, you know, my priest or rabbi, or whoever, they're responsible for my spiritual well-being. I don't.
Yeah.
It's nothing to do with me. I can't. You know, this is the belief systems that go around. Rather than saying, you know what, I can find out ways in which I can control where I'm going, because, you know, winds blow in all different directions. But once you've got a sailing boat, you can learn to go where you want to go, regardless of where the direction of the wind.
Yeah, brilliant, great metaphor as well. So, just on that, we've talked a lot about adversity and dealing with setbacks, and I'm really interested. You did cover it in the sort of, I think, the last chapter in the book as well. Is adversity and setbacks, are they necessary for us to make a change, or is it more likely that we're going to make a change because there's been a setback?
Yeah, I think it's certainly not necessary. So you don't need to suffer in order to make a change.
Yeah.
But what it does is it makes it more likely, because as you just said, it forces you that you've got to rethink, you've got to reevaluate things when you're dealing with loss, so you can take the benefit there, or you can come away feeling bitter and end up really unhappy and feeling just lost and resentful against everything and everyone. Or you can look for the seed of something there that will be good, and there will be good in it. There will be something. You mentioned, I think we mentioned earlier about success. What is success? If you look in a dictionary, you'll see there's normally two definitions. The second one will refer to things like material possessions and status and so forth. That's how most people get judged on stuff. But the primary one, success is over achieving a goal. Basically, that's when you're successful. And Earl Nightingale had a great quote for success. He says, "The progressive realization of a worthy ideal." So you're moving towards things, right? Because money comes and goes, and possessions are temporary as well. So at the end, people have to decide what success means to them.
Yeah.
Because you're not going to take anything with you wherever we go after it. And, someone once said to me recently, it was quite interesting, that we die two deaths. The first is when the heart stops beating, and the second is when people stop thinking about us, or anything that we've left behind stops having any value.
Okay.
And so
add value.
Yeah, I think if you look, certainly in terms of business, and in terms of how you feel about yourself and happiness, if you're always looking to add value, to do something that will, even if it's not, it's not necessarily going to get you any reward. The reward can be in just how that makes you feel. Having helped someone out or done something that's got real value. We feel that's what people want mostly from a job, to be acknowledged and to contribute.
I read that actually. I read the number one thing that people want from jobs when they work for employees is not money, it's not bonuses, it's not holidays, it's acknowledgement.
Yeah.
That's the number one thing they want, is acknowledgement from the boss, which I think it just highlights that point. So on that, so you've got another book out called The Secrets of Abundant Health, Wealth, Love and Happiness.
That's right. Yeah, they're 4 books. Yeah.
Okay, so how can we develop our lives in all them aspects? Because it's hard enough just thinking about our wealth or our love lives or our relationships or whatever it is. So how can we focus? How can we sort of bring it in and?
Okay, well, those books are basically they're very small parables based upon real people and real events, and they cover things like, for example, in the wealth book, it would be on goal setting, the power of goals. A lot of people don't set goals, and there was a story going around of the Harvard 1953 graduating year, where they asked the students if they had goals, life goals, and only 3% had written life goals, and they followed them for 25 years, and according to the story, those that the 3% that had written their goals were worth more financially, happier and so forth than the 97 put together. As it turned out, that was all a fabrication.
Right.
It never happened. Having said that, there has been research that done in a few years back, where they did find that people who have goals are more than 50% more likely to achieve what they want than people who don't have goals. So that's a huge difference. So if you want to make yourself more likely to achieve anything, you've got to write that goal down. When I was younger, I went to visit my father in Toronto. We wandered into this church, not because I'm I'm religious, I'm not even Christian. I'm an atheist actually. But so we wandered into this church, and nice little books, and there was a tiny book there called it was called It Works. It's a little red book, and the essence of this book was you write down your goals, and you put them in your wallet or in your pocket. You read them 3 times a day. And you know what? That was the most amazing thing, one of the most amazing I've ever learned.
Really?
Because what that forces you to do is always focus on what your priorities are. Yeah? And how it works, whether it's because, you are more focused on these things and that brings them more, but sometimes things will happen that you just can't explain. I think it's a really good habit.
Yeah.
To get into.
I think a similar one. I bought a big whiteboard. It's upstairs in my room now, and all the things that I want to do, achieve, the things that I've got to do to get there are on this big whiteboard, as well as having it on a piece of paper as well. So it's just there all the time. You're looking around. It's just in your face, and you can't help but sort of see it and acknowledge it and do something about it. And you've done exactly the same thing when you went to prison. You done that list of the things that you wanted to do.
Yeah.
And it obviously had an effect on you, not just the list, but going out and doing the things on the list. It had a big effect on you as well.
Definitely, 100%. I mean, and that's the thing, is that it's not about money. I feel rich. My life is rich. I wake up in the morning, I feel really happy.
Yeah.
To the point of I feel bad to someone says, "Oh, how are you doing?" I don't want to tell them. I don't want to tell them how I'm feeling because they'll start thinking, what's the matter with him?"
Yeah, but on the other, because it's a lot of people think like that. So we don't want to drive people can feel envious of what someone else has got, but they can also think, "Wow, if he can do it, I can do it."
You can be the example.
Definitely. And hence the reason why now
and you become a role model and an inspiration to.
This is I understand that part of it. So that's why it's like, okay, now we're going to go back and start speaking to others and trying to give that energy back and allowing them. But there are moments where you're like, I don't know what to say. I'm
feeling too upset and you don't want to. Yeah.
But the thing is, the crazy thing with it is that as good as you feel within yourself, and as good as you feel having these things that are important to you, whatever it may be. For me, with family and friends and children, but having that foundation and those things that are important to me, these other materialistic things and talking about wealth. The last 2 years, the business has grown 3 or 4 times in size. And it's just like on a crazy trajectory, which is going along as well as myself. As much as I'm growing, the business is growing. It's like, what's actually happening here? But it's that whole thing of keeping that mindset, keeping good within yourself, and then the other things around it just naturally just grow and develop with it.
Absolutely.
It's one of the things you spoke about. We spoke about happiness and love, but health as well. We've touched on, and you're developing apps at the moment. Can you just tell us a little bit more about the purpose of that?
Yeah, the idea behind these are called Medipoles, and the idea behind them is that people with the same condition can submit mini surveys, if you like, or polls on things that are not medical. So not on drugs or treatments, but on things. Might be deep breathing exercises or meditation or walking or excluding wheat from the diet or gluten or could be anything that has been shown to help, but there's never going to be any real research because research requires funding.
Okay.
And so the idea is that people with the same conditions can all share their experiences and it will collate that data in real time.
Right.
And so they decide, well, I'm going to try this one, I'll go, avoid meat for the next 30 days. And if enough people use it, then you start to get epidemiological data showing, wow, 2,000 people stopped eating meat, for example, and 62% said they were significantly better. Well, then that shows you, well, that's way beyond placebo.
Yeah.
It's worthwhile trying that or looking at it. Yeah. So that's the idea behind those apps.
And where did that idea grow out of to create that app? Was it a frustration you've had with things in the past, like with the current system, the way that sort of medicine's put in front of us and marketed?
Yeah, absolutely. It's to do with most people feel they feel disempowered. So as soon as they get a headache, they'll take a tablet, or whatever the problem is, rather than exploring basic life skills that we know can change, but there's been no real data. So do we know, is it really worth my while giving up, I don't know, bread for the next 4 weeks to see if it makes a difference?
Yeah.
So absolutely, I'm really cynical about the pharmaceutical industry, because it's just too much. Everything's focused, as we've said before, on maintenance rather than on cure. There's no financial interest in curing.
Yeah.
The financial benefits for a pharmaceutical company are on recurring revenues.
Tablets.
So whatever you have, with for instance with psoriasis, it's on things that you're going to keep using.
Yeah.
Rather than helping someone to really, years ago I even went down to the Dead Sea, where they have centres there, clinics for psoriasis and other conditions, because it's the lowest point on earth, so you can lie there in the sun for a long time without getting burned. And they've also got the Dead Sea is a salt sea, so it's got lots of minerals and that are good for the skin, and there's a mud bath that you can do. Anyway, people go down there for maybe 4 or 6 weeks, the skin gets cleared, they go back, and then they come back the next year.
Yeah.
So I went down to see people at the clinic, and they've got no interest in I showed them our creams, for example, because it might help people keep it away whilst they're, because it's expensive to keep it, if you're flying from America or whatever.
Yeah.
And the guys there were really honest with me. So, well, look, if I'm having 4,000 people a year coming and spending, I can't remember how much it was, but it was in the hundreds per week. Why do I want to keep it away?
So he wants repeat business.
Cool, absolutely.
And so do the pharmaceutical companies. They just want repeat business over again.
It's repeat business.
So we talked a little bit earlier about things like basic cures for a lot of illnesses, like sleep, having enough water, making sure what we talked about, food and nutrition is right, but that doesn't sell in vast quantities with people like the pharmaceutical companies. So
with the government, you're right, because the pharmaceuticals are the biggest employers, the biggest taxpayers, and the biggest advertising. It's not, you're not going to get that message. Although health can be very simple. I mean, it should be very simple, as you said. You can live without food for 30 days, for example. You could live without water maybe 3 days. Without air, you've got minutes.
yeah,
So
basics.
It shows you. But health is made up of more than chemistry and food. It's to do posture in order to get blood supply and nerve supply to all the organs, and it's to do with your emotions as well, because the emotions control everything.
So I get really annoyed, and she's probably going to hate me for saying this, but my girlfriend, whenever she gets a headache, she'll go, I need to take a tablet for it. And I said, well, when was the last time you drank some water? She said, oh, I haven't really drunk too much today. But then she'll have a load of water with the tablet, and then she'll go, oh, I feel so much better now. I mean, because you just had a glass of water and you're dehydrated, you haven't had anything all day. And I think just drink water. It's such a basic thing, rather than popping a tablet or whatever, paracetamol, whatever it is. So that was just something I thought of just then.
Absolutely.
That winds me up. But how can people then? So if it is diet, it is posture, it is everything that we've talked about. What's a simple way that people can? It might seem too much for people. It might seem easier just for people to take a tablet.
Sometimes they haven't got the time. If you've got a big headache and if you're not drinking enough water, and it can be caused. Headaches can be caused by anything. From a lot of different things. It could be a problem in your neck, it could be eye strain, it could be lots of things, to be fair. But often they haven't got the time to, so a tablet makes it easy. It just masks the pain. But the problem is pain, as just in the same way as trauma can be beneficial, pain is often beneficial, because it's your body telling you, don't do it. It's like if you're putting a pin in the wall to hang a picture, and you smash your thumb, that's going to hurt. If you keep doing it, you're going to smack, end up in the thumb. And that's what we do, because if you keep masking the pain, You know, you could be, some people, they have conditions where they can't feel pain. You could be sitting by a fire, and before you know it, your arm is completely charred and useless because the pain didn't tell you to let's get it out. So you know, we've got to look at these things differently, and really, you know, now with the internet, there's so much information, probably too much information. You've got to really know what's good and what's bad and what, because there's a lot of misinformation as well. But you know, I always went by on the basis that what felt right to me, what makes sense. You know,
logic.
Logic. To say, you know, does it make sense to take even supplements? Does it really make sense to take a tablet that is the equivalent of 600 oranges? I'm not sure that makes sense to me. You know, as opposed to juicing, fresh raw foods, you know, live foods that are, you know, lots of that contain lots of antioxidants and minerals. And one of the problems, of course, is that the farming today has depleted the soil of minerals. So you've got mineral depletion that in some places it's like 95% depleted. So you've got to have an awful lot more food because you're
not getting it through the.
So people are not feeling nourished because they're not getting the nutrients. And they, you know, again, there's lots of studies showing. In America, they found that areas where the soil was low in selenium, which is a micronutrient, they had highest rates of cancer. So, you know, skin cancer, for example, we're all taught that, you know, that it's being caused from the sun, but in actual fact, research shows that the sun creams themselves interfere with the skin's DNA, and things like ultraviolet, fluorescent lighting, excessive fats, animal fats in the diet, lack of selenium and lack of antioxidants. So if you have one tomato, you double your protection for UV rays.
I have no idea.